Rendering is something that can be intimidating, but in this video I hope that I can break things down to make it easier for anyone to follow along and learn from. I think the first thing that I should get out of the way is what I actually use to draw. I draw using a screenless tablet and use the desktop version of Clip Studio Paint alongside PureRef as an additional program to store all of my references. Most of the steps that I'll be going through will be applicable with most programs, but there are some things that are only available in Clip Studio Paint. For canvas size, I like to use an A4 size at 350 dpi, but you should use whatever your device can support without having your program slow down. For a general baseline though, I would choose something that is over 1000 by 1000 pixels at over 300 dpi, as this is a good baseline for most images. You can obviously change the width and height depending on what kind of art that you want to make. In most cases, it'll either be landscape or portrait. The brushes that I use are all custom, but they are all available for free in the Clip Studio Assets store. I'll leave a link in the description for anyone that wants to try them out for themselves. These are my main brushes that I use for rendering, but you should use whatever you are most comfortable with. I think that brushes matter more if you use a lot of texture in your art, like painters do, but in most cases, a hard round brush and the default tools in the program will be all that you need to draw. Most programs should be able to replicate these brushes, so try messing around or looking online for brushes that suit your needs. The first step in any drawing is to look for references. You can find these on any social media site, but I think the best and easiest one to use is Pinterest. In my opinion, it has the best algorithm for finding references and images for inspiration, but it shouldn't be the only thing that you use. Whenever I find an illustration that I like to save it to my gallery or photos, so I can refer back to it whenever I want to. I think it's a good habit to save images that you really like, so that you can reference them whenever you want. Understanding the art that you like can go a long way with developing your own style and help you improve as you continue to learn. The next part is to actually open up your art program to start sketching. I prefer to store my layers into folders for the 4 major steps that I do. The first for the sketch, second one for the base colors and lighting, third for rendering, and the last and final one for edits and final color correction. I won't get too deep into how to sketch because there are already a lot of tutorials out there. Instead, I'll try to give a few pointers to help me out when I was learning to sketch the face. The first thing that a lot of beginners get wrong when drawing the face is the angle of the eyes. Our eyes lay on a curved surface, so when we look up or down, the angle of the eyes will curve alongside it. Although we're drawing in a 2D space, the characters that we are portraying should be 3-dimensional. The thing that I did was to just practice heads over and over again. I know it isn't the most interesting way to learn, but to me it helped me a lot with understanding the angles and made it easier for me to draw them whenever I wanted to. I like to merge my sketch folder and then fill everything in with a grayish color. I duplicate this layer and fill it underneath with white. This makes it easier for the next step that I do, which is to put a mask on the gray layer and erase where I want the highlights to be. Most people when drawing work from light to dark, but instead of that I like to work from dark to light. For me personally, this helps with making the forms look more realistic and also with making the lighting look more dynamic. It also makes it easier to test different types of lighting quickly before you start getting into any complicated rendering. This part might seem complicated, but it is honestly not as hard as it seems. When you are making the shadows, you have to imagine that everything that you see are simple shapes. The head can be simplified as a sphere. If you are able to draw simple shapes, such as a simple shaded sphere, you will be able to render most things out there. This is something that you can learn by studying the objects around you. In general, just try to simplify everything into 2 tones, the highlights and the shadows. In most animes, this is how they actually shade. It's called cell shading, and as long as you can get this part right, you'll be 90% of the way there. After I have the light and shadows down, I start adding colors to it. I like adding the skin tone with an airbrush and then going in with a harder brush for everything else, such as the hair and clothing. I don't have a pre-made palette that I go off of, so whenever I choose colors, I just pick them off of the color wheel. After putting down all of the colors on the shadow layer, I move on to the light layer and start filling the colors for that. At this stage, I am messing around with the colors a lot and trying to pick out the ones that I like the most for the character. Just changing the hue, saturation, and lightness can help a lot with deciding the colors that you want. Throughout most of the stages, I am also liquefying everything to move everything and fix the proportions. After this point, I merge everything again and move on to the next phase of rendering. In this phase, I work on adding the darker shadows and adding more details to the drawing. Things like hair strands do a lot to the piece to add more volume to the head. This is the best time to do any final adjustments before you start finalizing everything. This stage can go on for as long as you want. It depends on how detailed you want your piece to be. Sometimes it's better to leave things more simplified if you like that kind of style, and for most people you can just end it there. For me, my last and final step for rendering is color correction. I do this by adding a tone curve layer, gradient map, and color balance layer to fix all of the colors that I want. Tone curve layers help me with fixing the values of my drawing. It's good to have separated values for everything. Having separated values makes your piece stand out more. Color balance layers will balance your colors depending on the lighting scenario and background that you choose. If you have a background with a lot of green, then adding more green to your character will make your character fit in more with the background. If your scene is blue, like a blue sky, then you should also have a little bit of blue added. This goes the same for orange or any color that your background is. And then also depending on how dark and how bright your scene is. Finally, I add a gradient map to change everything. This step unifies all of the colors and can make it more interesting by adding extra colors inside. I just add the colors here and finish everything off. If you want to add a background, there are also other things you can do. If you plan a background from the start, it makes it easier to draw everything by hand, but for me, I've been trying to photobash everything. So adding it at the end isn't too hard for me. For photobashing, I use Clip Studio Paint's artistic filter with these settings and position the background to where I want it to be. Having the lighting and the background and the character match is the most important part for photobashing. In a lot of recent animes that you see this technique being used everywhere, so don't be afraid to give it a try. Just make sure that you're using images that are freely available. Or, better yet, take photos yourself to get the best results that you can. I always say this, but I believe that getting better at photography can help a lot with art too. Learning photo composition helps with placing your character in the right spot and understanding what looks good for backgrounds. In general, this is how I like to do things. For rendering, there are so many different ways that other people render. Don't treat this video as the only way that you have to render. Look around for other people that you like and look at the way they render and see if it suits your workflow more. Also, if you want to see the full process of this illustration, I'll leave a link in the description for the entire process. Either way, thank you for watching and I hope to see you again in another video. Bye bye, bye bye.